Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, unless you're on the West Coast. In that case, good morning. I'm Dan Stein, president of FAIR, and this is our very first Twitter Live from our studios here at FAIR here in Washington, D.C. Separation anxiety. The news media goes berserk. Major news story the last several days, kids being separated from their parents at the border, hysterics and antics from newscasters who used to be described as journalists, who now seem to be ministers of propaganda on behalf of some kind of a political agenda, putting the Trump administration on the defensive when all they've been doing is following the law that we, the American people, through Congress, have enacted. Now, I have with me Joe Gomez. Joe is FAIR's press secretary. He's also someone with 10 years of experience as a professional journalist. In fact, he came directly to FAIR from, you're not going to believe it, NBC Radio. Watching the news coverage over the last several years, having been myself covered by the news for almost 40 years, and knowing what used to be considered journalistic standards, I have to say, Joe, what are we looking at these days?
Well, we're looking at pretty low standards, I think, Dan. I mean, the media circus that's been created, for instance, over this picture of this little girl who was allegedly separated, torn away allegedly from her mother, this migrant child. That picture made it on Time magazine. It would been the most talked about picture all week.
Well, it was a cover of Time magazine.
Right, it was the cover of Time magazine.
But they actually did photoshopping to make it look like she was crying at President Trump and he's staring down at her.
Right, yeah.
So it's fraud. It's fraud.
It's a fraud.
But the fraud doesn't start there.
No. I mean,
what do we know about the little girl?
The little girl, it turns out that she was only being searched by the Border Patrol, which the Border Patrol can do. I mean, they search everybody for arms or drugs or, bad things. I mean, people use kids to carry in bad things, unfortunately, in the United States. Illegal immigrants.
But she's not being searched when she's crying.
No,
her mom had just put her down.
Exactly.
Because they were searching her mom.
They were searching her mom, and then her mom was a little bit away from the girl. But the point is, she was never actually torn away from her mother. They were just temporarily distant from each other, and that was it. And that picture suddenly created this whole circus, and it turned into a movement.
We know more about the girl.
We do.
Okay.
We know that the little girl, apparently she's doing fine. She has a father back in Honduras. The family came from Honduras.
Father's got a good job.
Father has a great job.
Port authority.
Father didn't even want the family to leave.
The family didn't leave. She has 3 daughters.
Oh, that's true.
Right? She left 2 behind.
Right.
So she took her younger daughter. Why did she think that was the way to get into the U.S.?
Well, I think that everybody can figure that one out. She was to get the most sympathy, obviously.
Well, but she paid a coyote $6,000.
Right.
Fully aware that if she brought her youngest daughter, she had a good chance of being released.
Right, correct. I mean,
she left 2 other daughters there.
That's correct. So
did we separate her from her family?
No.
She separated herself from her family.
That's correct, Dan.
Okay.
We dissected the myth. I mean, that was the myth that
Is there any evidence that she was abused?
There's no evidence.
Is there any evidence that she was politically active?
No.
Is there any evidence that she was being persecuted as a result of state action in Honduras?
I don't believe so, no.
Is there any evidence, therefore, that she's a bona fide refugee?
No, I don't think so.
Did she say why she wanted to come?
She wanted to come because she wanted to get a better life. I think that's what she said, yes.
Okay, and so the United States apparently is supposed to just
take people in because they want to live in a place with a better economy? I mean, it's remarkable. Actually, you asked me if she was happy, was she scared? I looked at pictures that were posted from like their Facebook profile on this Daily Mail story.
Happy.
Happy family, smiling. The little girl's happy. They're happy with the other kids. The father's happy. Now they're not happy because the mother decided to go take her baby and trust these dangerous coyotes and go through Mexico to try to get into the U.S. illegally.
And so this is essentially a byproduct of organized crime.
Absolutely.
Paying smugglers to bring you up through Mexico.
Yes, and it happens all the time. And
was that a safe approach to getting to the U.S.?
Absolutely not, Dan. That's one of the most under-talked about things, I think, in the media right now is the dangers that these illegal aliens face when they try to pay these coyotes money and then come into the United States illegally through Mexico because they oftentimes they face exploitation, they could be attacked, they could be raped, many, many horrible things. Why would a mother want to even risk that with her young baby girl?
So what has happened to CNN, MSNBC? What has happened to some portions of the legacy media in the way they're covering this story, this whole story? What's going on?
Well, it seems as though once they saw that picture, they immediately created their own narrative. And that narrative was that the Border Patrol was tearing away families, separating them. And then we saw the pictures that came out from the detention facility, which was actually just a temporary processing center. The pictures that came out Sunday, and then it just became this storm, this media storm that really probably shouldn't have been.
The question becomes one of accuracy and a journalist's fidelity to facts. What's going on?
Right. You have to dig into the story.
Is all that being compromised in service of this anti-Trump administration agenda?
I think so. I think that because President Trump is just so, the media is just so toxic with him. For some reason, they love to just dig into him for anything. And they were basically served a silver platter full of delicious meats and whatever with that picture that was released, or those pictures that were released of that temporary processing center on Sunday.
Yeah, well, again, this is the children have privacy, right? They have privacy rights. The media is supposed to respect the privacy rights. The media claimed that the effort to try to protect the children's privacy by not allowing the media to come in there and make it a circus, what did they say it was equivalent to?
The media claims that this was like an internment camp. I mean, they tried to go back and make World War II comparisons. That shelter has been around for years. It was around during the Obama era in 2014 when they had a similar surge. They had similar shelters where you saw children sleeping on mats. This is not something, look.
So, I mean, what happens if the American people can no longer trust the so-called media to tell them the truth anymore?
They're going to have to find somewhere else to get their news. I mean, and maybe that's fair. You know, maybe that's what we should start showing.
Fair is where you're going to get your news.
The real news, not the fake news. You're getting the real news here. Because we dig behind the pictures and we find out what the real story is. And the real story with that child was not what originally was painted to be.
The Democrats don't seem to have an alternative in terms of solutions, right? Other than let them all in?
Well, that seems to be basically the big push by Democrats is the massive amnesty, number one, and then just like let all of the illegal aliens come into the country and let them off scot-free. So not only are they creating a magnet, and they have this problem at the border already with these detention facilities, which, by the way, existed under President Obama all the way back to 2014. And some people think...
In 2015, this judge, Dolly G., Ninth Circuit District Court judge, simply decided unilaterally that she would limit their ability to detain minors, even if they were with their parents. This is what has thrown everything to chaos. Once more, we see an unelected district judge, we've seen this over and over again in the Trump administration, taking things into her own hands and essentially thwarting the agenda that the American people were promised. Okay, let's make something very clear. All of us believe firmly in the protection of basic human dignity and human rights. It is important when people come across the border illegally that they be treated with respect and dignity. However, that does not mean we have to provide them procedural process that winds up defeating the very purpose of immigration controls. Nor can these procedural processes undermine the very deterrent value associated with ensuring compliance with immigration law. The time has come to have a responsible public debate. Clearly, Donald Trump and the Democrats are serving up this issue for the 2018 campaign. There may be a piece of legislation coming up in the House floor. We'll be talking about that with R.J. Hammond on Monday, but the chances are it will not get through the Senate if it does pass. Meantime, we also know that the Goodlatte bill only failed by about 25 votes. In fact, if Speaker Ryan and the leadership had leaned into the Goodlatte bill, problems, even though it had a lot of good stuff in it, it might have actually passed the House. Meantime, making progress on eliminating chain migration, interior enforcement, and border control is what this administration is all about, and it's what FAIR is all about. Watching the Democrats now stand unilaterally in opposition, watching big agriculture, Chamber of Commerce, and the Business Roundtable stand in our way, aggressively come out against this so-called family separation policy, which is entirely lawful, at the same time coming out against mandatory E-Verify, coming out in favor of an expanded guest worker program, and coming out against limits on immigration, tells you that the Republican Party is still far too much under the influence of the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, and big agriculture. But you can be sure FAIR is always going to be there fighting the battle. And I got to say, you like Joe's hat? If you like Joe's hat,
You like my hat?
I want you to like this live Twitter feed. Give us some encouragement. I think it's okay. I like it. It's stylish.
It's a beautiful hat.
It's a beautiful hat.
I got it in Vietnam.
My wife won't let me wear hats.
Really?
Yeah, but if you like the hat,
I like the hat.
give us a thumbs up. And we will be joining you again shortly, I promise. Thanks for joining us. This is Joe Gomez, and I'm Dan Stein.